A fraction political with Rachel here, who was just elected. It's barely a month ago. She and David Edershank, Rachel Payne, were elected in Victoria with the Legalise Cannabis Party. It's a fantastic thing. It's fantastic she's up here this weekend. And you know, listening to the talks and what you ended up on, Des, too, I think a lot of the votes we are getting is to do with roadside drug testing. People are actually disgusted and, you know, you think 30% maybe, we think even more. The people who want to try medical cannabis don't even try it because they're worried about losing their licence, especially in country areas. So it's a big issue. Anyway, Rachel's got news on that. Here she is.
Thank you. Thank you, Michael, for having me. Thank you, everyone, for listening. I won't be too long. I just wanted to, first of all, talk about what it was important to talk about how we got here in Victoria, because you do have an election coming up shortly, and I think New South Wales will get someone elected. I think that we should be really positive about legalised cannabis picking up space and picking up a seat at least in this election. So I thought I would just talk about our experience in Victoria, because we started... the movement has been going for quite some time in Victoria, but the party only got registered in October, so we had little to no time between October and November to get a campaign started. What we focused on was look for the leaf on the ballot, legalise cannabis. The name says it all, and a few of the candidates, Mark was one of our candidates who's going to speak next, had amazing candidates from all different parts of the sector when it came to both medicinal and social use cannabis. But the main priority for us was just to highlight the campaign, and I can't emphasise enough how much it really does help just getting behind the candidates, getting behind the messaging. So anything you can share online or via conversations that you may have is really helpful. Make sure that you're following all the social media pages, whether it be on Facebook or Instagram. Suzette and Mark are both here with QR codes. Anything you can donate that can help buy some more corflus or some T-shirts, just to get that messaging out there. It's going to be really important, because the voter is really disenfranchised, and there are so many people out there who vote for cannabis that don't use cannabis themselves personally, but they know someone that does, and they really think. The main conversation I was having on the polling booths was, why hasn't this happened already? Why aren't we legalising, or why aren't we at least thinking about different ways to stimulate our economy, or different ways we can use cannabis as medicine, different ways we can access cannabis. So some of those conversations you'll be having out there on the booths, and if you do have time to volunteer your services, I really encourage it, because we're all grassroots and we got here. So in Victoria there was 2 of us elected, which is kind of unheard of for a micro party, as they would call us, to get 2 candidates elected. The beautiful thing about Victoria is we have an upper house, which is much like your Senate in the federal election, and in the Senate, legalised cannabis holds the balance of power. So our vote is incredibly important to the Andrews government. We also have a crossbench of 11 where there are 4 Greens, 2 legalised cannabis, 1 animal justice, a Liberal Democrat, and a Pauline Hanson One Nation representative, who all support cannabis law reform. So they know that this is something that is going to be on the radar, this is on their agenda. We've only had our 2nd sitting week, but already in our first sitting week we put up a bill to change the roadside drug testing. For us, that's the most important issue currently. It's the most important issue for medicinal cannabis users. We want all patients to be treated the same, no matter what your medication. So we've had the bill put up. I'll be debating it next sitting week, which is on the 8th, International Women's Day, on the 8th of March. And the conversations we've had so far, and I think that, who read out the quote before? It was David, wasn't it? Yeah. David read out the quote that the Premier said, and I might repeat it later because I do have a photograph of it. We found that we met with, after we presented the bill, it was pretty straightforward what we're asking for, which is just for cannabis to be treated like any other medication. If a driver is clearly impaired, well then the police have the authority to make a judgment based on impairment, but they're not doing that currently. They're just testing for presence. If it's in your system, too bad. There you go. You're off to court, you lose your licence. So it's deterring people from using their medication. It's making people more likely to go back onto particularly addictive opioid-based medications rather than using medicinal medications. And it's meaning that people are either running the gauntlet or not using their medication at all. So for the Premier to come out and state that he can see that there is an issue there, the Victorian government has invested a lot of time and energy and money into the medicinal cannabis industry, and we're just trying to frame it in a way that we're trying to fix an issue with the law. Any medication should be accessible, and it should be there should be no issue when it comes to how you're having a relationship with your doctor and working out best ways forward with your medication, and that includes advice on when you can and can't drive, or any sort of operation you might be doing. So we've met with the Health Minister, we've met with the Treasurer, we've met with the Road Safety Minister, we've met with the Minister for Police. All of them are pretty open to the fact that something needs to change. So fingers crossed, watch this space. We've been told by quite a few of the other ministers that, look, they probably won't just change the laws straight away, but they may offer a trial, which is sort of what we're hoping for. If we get one step forward and we don't have any issues, we've seen no issues in Tasmania with the same sort of laws we're seeking, then we should have warrant to proceed. So fingers crossed, hopefully we can get there. Let me just check my notes because I know I have more to talk about. And I think I did mention balance of power and some of the conversations that we're having, and you'll often hear, people talk about legalisation. Obviously, the name of our political party sort of states what we want to do. But when you're talking particularly to other members of Parliament, you're sort of talking about decriminalisation or legalisation. They just buck and weave at any of those conversations. So it's like a red flag to a bull. We just then try to frame it in a way of, we want meaningful discussion around regulation of cannabis. And we do know that, just looking at regulation is really opening up that conversation for regulating supply, regulating demand, but also looking at economic opportunities for particularly Victoria with the pandemic, went through a huge loss when it came to their costing and their budgets. So I know that the Treasurer particularly was quite open to those conversations, and that's what we're going to do over the next 4 years, is continuously push these conversations, educate, not alienate, and try and work with them to the best of our abilities. So we don't think that we can just come out and say, let's legalise. You don't get our vote unless you do legalise. We don't think that'll work. They'll just freeze us out. And we know that 70% of legislation they can just push through, no problem, without needing our vote. But they will need our vote eventually, and that's where we have ability to sort of negotiate. So, I would love to see more compassionate policy. So we know that the biggest harm for cannabis users is prohibition. So having a model where people have more access, medicinally, I would love to see accessibility increase, whether it be through the cost of prescriptions reducing, but also having the ability to grow your own at home. We know that most people who are medicinally prescribed can't afford their full prescriptions, so they are substituting their own medicine by either growing their own or accessing it on the black market. Now that's putting them at risk, and we don't want to see that anymore. We also know that prohibition means that you're exposed to things you may not ordinarily be exposed to. So if you're seeing someone that is your dealer, you may be offered other things, and that's what we're seeing particularly with young people. So, all of these conversations we're having, we're bringing them on board, and fingers crossed we can get there. I don't think there was much more I wanted to talk to you about. The roadside drug testing is sort of what's on our radar. And another thing, I guess, that came up in that conversation is that, particularly with talking to a lot of the specialists and the doctors who prescribe, is that we know that impairment is the clincher, is the issue that they're going to say, well, how do you know that they're impaired? Well, as I keep saying, it's a relationship between yourself and your doctor. But we also identified that alcohol, if you have a zero blood alcohol limit, you're less likely to be impaired with your medicinal cannabis. So one of the negotiations that we might put on the table is that if you are prescribed, you have to have a zero blood alcohol limit to be just waved through by the police. So we know that that might be a little bit more risk averse for them. And it will be baby steps, but I think we will get there. So keep an eye on things.
Any questions for Rachel? Is that working? Yeah. Any questions? We're looking for homegrown, Rach. That's what we're hanging out for.
Oh yeah, 6 plants.
End of helicopter raids.
That's right. I had to get rid of my plants when I got elected.
So I didn't intend this to be a legalised cannabis thing at all. That's happened by coincidence. You were coming up anyway, and I said, come to the medican. But what is a real coincidence is the next talker, Mark Zeelan here, who is now, just last week we decided, the Tweed candidate for legalised cannabis New South Wales.
Amazing. Mark is a fabulous candidate. Do get behind him.